Hi friends, in this lesson we're going to look at how to write a good answer for IELTS Writing Task 1, describing a process diagram. I'm going to show you a great structure you can use, give you lots of good vocabulary, and show you a sample Band 9 answer. If you're taking the IELTS Academic test soon, this video is going to be so helpful for you. But very quickly before I begin, if you're new to this channel, hi, I'm teacher Luke from EnglishTestReady.com. If you're looking for an IELTS tutor, that's the website to go to. There are so many qualified expert IELTS teachers on that website waiting to teach you and help you pass your IELTS test. That's EnglishTestReady.com. Anyway, back to this lesson, we're going to look at how to describe the process diagram now. Here is a good 4-step plan you can use when planning and writing your answer. So this is the 4-step plan you can use for the process diagram. Firstly, you need to identify the main features. Then you write a short introduction, a short overview, and then you write your detailed paragraphs. Each of these steps are equally important, and if you do each one well, you will get a good score on this writing task. Step 1 is identifying the main features, basically planning, but this stage is so important. I do recommend you take your time with the planning stage, especially with the diagram question. If you plan well, you will be able to write a better answer, so let me show you how to plan well here. So here are some things you need to think about when identifying the main features. The first point is, what is the process diagram showing? Now on the IELTS Writing Task 1, there can be many different types of process diagrams. For example, how bees produce honey, how to generate electricity from the sea, or the fish pie production line. By looking at the diagram and reading the instructions, you will get an idea about what the process diagram is showing. It's really hard to prepare exactly for this question type because there are many different diagrams you can get. It will be good to practice writing lots of different ones to get used to it, but it's really hard to prepare it for an exact diagram. There are just too many options on the IELTS test. The next thing you want to do is count how many steps or stages are in the diagram. Now, steps and stages might be a little bit different. I consider steps to be smaller parts of a process and stages to be large stages in the process cycle. Think of stages more like categories or something like that. And like I said, I do recommend you actually count these before you begin writing because you'll probably write the number of the stages either in your general overview or in your detailed paragraphs. Let's have a look here. So let's take a look at this example of the honeybees. As you can see, there are actually 7 steps, and they are numbered in this example, which is nice, but they might not always be numbered. Now, this is what I mean by stages. In this example, this diagram has 2 clear stages, stage A and stage B. There's no steps here, like step 1, 2, 3. There are different stages in the process. Okay, so far so good. We've identified what the process diagram is showing and how many steps or stages there are. Now it's important to look at the end result. Of course, the end result is important to mention in your writing, so identifying that early and how the process ends up that way is really important. Different diagrams, of course, have different end results, but being able to identify that quickly is a good thing to do. There are lots of examples, but let's take a look at one to show you what I'm talking about. So here's an example from earlier. What do you think the end result is? Well, the end result is the electricity that's being produced in both stages. This is an easy example. The end result, of course, is number 7, the last number, and it is the honey that has been produced. Okay, a quick recap on the planning stage. You want to identify what the process diagram is showing, looking at the question and the diagram together. Then you want to take a look at the different steps or stages in the diagram, and of course, identify the final outcome or the end result. For IELTS Writing Task 1, you have 20 minutes to complete the whole task, and I recommend you do spend a few minutes on the planning because it will help you so much when you are actually writing your answer. Not only will it help you to write your answer, but it will help you to get a better score. Because if you take a look at the IELTS scoring criteria, to get a band 7, you need to clearly present and highlight the key features. And it's very difficult to write about all of the key features and get a band 7 if you don't do your planning well enough. So make sure you spend a good few minutes on planning. But of course, after you've planned, you need to write, and those are steps 2, 3, and 4. Your introduction, overview, and detailed paragraphs. And each step, the introduction, overview, and detailed paragraphs, are all essential to get a good score on this writing task. I'll show you why by looking at the scoring criteria later in this video, but for now, let's start by looking at the introduction and how you can write a good introduction sentence. Yes, I said sentence, not paragraph. One sentence is enough for the introduction on this writing task. And it's not that difficult. Let me show you how to do it easily now. So for the introduction, you're basically answering this question. What does the diagram show? You can answer this question by paraphrasing the question you're given. And I think it's relatively simple. Let's take this process as an example. What is the question? Well, the question is, the pictures below show how tea is produced. They also illustrate the process of making a cup of tea. So as you can see right away, there are two stages in this writing question. And for this question, we're lucky on the IELTS test, they actually split it up into two sentences to help us identify the stages easily. Anyway, back to the introduction. So your job now is to paraphrase these questions. This is what I wrote. These images demonstrate how tea is produced and how a cup of tea is made. So that's it, a very simple introduction. One sentence is enough. To paraphrase, you can change some words around. For example, illustrate to demonstrate or illustrate to show. And in this example, the question had two sentences, so I joined them together. Simple. The introduction for this task is quite easy. And after you've done an introduction, you need to write a general overview. And that's really important. It's even in the scoring criteria. If you look here, to get a band 7 or above, you need to present a clear overview of the main trends, differences, or stages. So of course, if that's in the criteria, then writing an overview is really important, especially if you want to get a band 7 or above, which I think most of you do. Writing an overview for a graph or table is pretty easy, but for a diagram, it can be a little bit confusing. But I have a few tips to help you. Let's take a look at those now. So when you're writing an overview, you want to give a general description of the process. So just like the introduction, one sentence is enough for this part. If you can write two, of course go ahead, but one is enough. You don't need to go into detail. And I think it's a good thing to help the examiner know you're writing an overview by using different phrases which signal an overview. For example, in general, generally, overall, by and large, on the whole, these types of phrases. And this is what I wrote. Overall, there are 18 steps in the diagram, from sowing the tea seeds in India and China to enjoying a cup of tea at home. So that's my simple overview. I mentioned how many steps there are, 18 in total, and I talked about the beginning of the process and the end of the process. That's something you can think about doing if you get this type of process diagram on your IELTS Writing Task 1. So we've written the introduction and overview, and so far we've only written two sentences, which is fine. Now let's go into the most important parts of this task, which is of course writing about the details. For this, you should write at least one full paragraph, but I strongly recommend you write two if you can, and go into as much detail as possible. This is not easy, but it is essential to get a good score. Let's take a look at how you can do that now. So like I mentioned, you want to write one or two paragraphs, ideally two. The main topic of your paragraph will depend on what the process diagram is. But for this diagram, I'm going to split my paragraphs into the first paragraph describing the production, so how the tea was made and delivered to the supermarket. And the second paragraph is going to describe the consumption, how the tea was bought, made, and drunk. Of course, how you organize your paragraphs will depend greatly on what your process diagram is on the test. But try to make sure that each paragraph has a main feature you are describing. This will make it easier for your examiner to read and understand your paragraphs. Okay, there are some more tips. It's important that you don't just label. Don't just say what's in the process diagram. Instead, try to describe the process in detail. And a good way to do this is to use sequencing vocabulary. Here are a bunch of phrases you can use to help you sequence your answer well. We have some phrases for the first stage, the middle stages, and the last stage. IELTS examiners really want you to use a range of vocabulary, so try to use different sequences throughout your answer. Don't repeat the same words over and over again. Examiners don't like that and they will give you a lower score if you do that. Okay, let me show you how I've used these sequences and describe the details of this diagram in these 2 paragraphs. The first step is that the tea seeds are sown and then the sun shines, which causes the seeds to grow into plants. Once the plants have grown sufficiently, the leaves are picked by the farmers and put into baskets. After the picking stage, the tea leaves are spread out in the sun to be dried. The tea leaves are then packed into boxes, loaded onto lorries, and delivered to the supermarkets. In order to make a cup of tea, you first need to buy a box of tea from the supermarket. Next, you fill a kettle with water and put it on the stove to boil. Meanwhile, you put a tea bag in a cup, and once the kettle has boiled, the water is poured into the cup. Having been left in the cup for 2 minutes, the tea bag should then be removed. At this point, milk and sugar can be added. The final step is to drink a nice cup of hot tea. And here's the answer in full. Okay, as you know, on the IELTS Writing Task 1, you might also have to describe a map, and this video here will help you do that. We talk about the different structure of writing about a map, and I give you lots of useful vocabulary you can use to describe a map really well. So if you need help with maps, this video here is the one for you, and I'll see you there. Take care.